My name is Chris Caird, the Professional Programs Assistant. Before we begin today with our official presentation, I would just like to give you all a very brief overview, an intro into our UMBC Shady Grove operations here. So to give you a little bit of background, USG, or the Universities at Shady Grove, is a regional higher education center. It offers over 80 degree programs at both the undergraduate and graduate levels across 9 universities in the University System of Maryland, all on one campus here in Rockville, Maryland, in Montgomery County. And the location is very critical for us here. We're located right along the I-270 technology corridor. So there's lots of opportunity in local industry and opportunities for both students and alumni alike. We are just 18 miles from DC, which can be reached directly via the Metro Red Line, which can be accessed at the Shady Grove Metro stop, which is just about 4 miles from campus. And USG is considered a full service non-residential campus. So that means you have opportunities for the same services that are offered at a traditional campus or the home campus. The only difference is that it's non-residential, so there's no dorms. It's commuter-only campus. Here we have, these are the 9 universities that are partnered with USG in the University System of Maryland. As you can see, UMBC is one of them, but there are others as well. And this right here is just a map for your locational awareness. Universities at Shady Grove is about 40 miles from our home campus, which is in Baltimore County. As you can see, UMBC home campus is right on the edge of Baltimore City, but here at Shady Grove, we are much closer to Washington, DC. So to go over some of our services here, at USG as a UMBC student, you are earning a true UMBC degree. There's no asterisk or addendum or caveat or anything like that about which campus you enroll in classes at. They're both really the same except for the location. USG offers all of the same resources that, as I said, a traditional campus would have, and you still have access to all of the UMBC main campus resources as well. So things like career prep, counseling, and scholarships as well. So the tuition that you pay here is the exact same you would pay at the main campus as well for the classes you take. The only difference is that the fee structure associated with these classes is a little different just because of the location. And when it comes to scholarship opportunities, you actually have more opportunities here as a UMBC student at the universities at Shady Grove, because you have opportunities both through the UMBC scholarship portal, known as Scholarship Retriever, as well as USG's own scholarship system. So twice the amount of opportunities available to you. Right here is an overview of the degree programs that UMBC offers at the universities at Shady Grove. This includes our 8 undergraduate degrees, our 4 graduate degrees, including industrial organizational psychology, and several post-baccalaureate certificates as well, including one for IO, organizational consulting. And as a special highlight, we also want to go over our regional graduate tuition rate. So for those of you who don't know, the tuition rate does differ whether you are a Maryland resident or a non-Maryland resident. Students who reside in Maryland are charged a lower tuition rate. However, students who are who reside in these specific neighboring counties and states are eligible for in-state tuition, even if you don't live in Maryland. This includes DC and Delaware and the listed counties for Pennsylvania and Northern Virginia. And if you'd like more information, the link at the bottom of the page will take you to our page with more info. So at this point, I'm just about done with my introduction. If you would like more information about our graduate programs at UMBC Shady Grove, please feel free to scan the QR code on screen or follow the first link there at the bottom. This will take you to our Contact Us form, which you can fill out if you'd like more specific questions answered, or if you just like general information. We'll get back to you with 24 or 48 hours. Completing the form will also make sure you're entered into our system to receive info about upcoming events and deadlines and things of that nature. And at the very bottom is our Shady Grove email. If you have any questions you'd like to ask specifically, I'll be sure to get back to you as soon as possible. So at this point now, I'm going to turn it over to our graduate program director, Dr. Elliot Lassen, who's the director of our industrial organizational psychology program, so he can take it away with the presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chelsea and team. I want to recognize the presence of my colleague, Dr. Alyssa Abad, and who helped me in developing this presentation here today. And looking at the panel of participants, I see some alumni of our program. So I just want to give a shout out to all of our graduates who have joined us here today. It's my understanding that there might be some current students, so welcome. Perhaps some prospective applicants might be on the call, as well as industry partners to whom we reached out today. The topic that just one other housekeeping point, and that is Dr. Abad will be monitoring the chat. If there's a question that's really like on point, then we can kind of intervene with that question. Otherwise, we'll save the questions until the end. So there's quite a bit to cover this afternoon. So I am going to be a bit brief through some of these slides. At times, I will kind of pause to make a connection between some of the themes that are being covered on the slides and make the connection between that and something in our program, something perhaps within our coursework or experiential opportunities. So I'm going to be using the slide presentation as sort of our base, and I might kind of zoom out briefly during the presentation. The topic today is talent management for 2025 and beyond. Some of you, perhaps many of you, have heard of the term talent management, some abbreviate it with TM. And as you can see from the subtitle here, Building Organizational Excellence Through Strategic Human Capital Development, much of talent management is strategic. And I think that, as you will see, that strategic approach is what differentiates how we deal with employees. It will be differentiated from perhaps a more or less enlightened way of doing that from a generation or two ago. So that's why I wanted to really make it a contemporary and relevant presentation, and that's why it's covering 2025 and beyond. But as you'll see, a number of the themes have been emerging and evolving recently. So if we can get the next slide, please. Okay, so our roadmap for the presentation, some of the foundations, theoretical frameworks. What do current talent management practices look like? What are some trends, best practices? We'll be spending some time on that, as well as we look into the future beyond 2025 and looking at talent strategy through a more futuristic lens, a more prospective lens, rather than just focusing on the here and now. Next slide, please. In defining what talent management is, as you can see, the bullet points or dashes in this slide really represent a life cycle approach, meaning an individual's career life cycle approach within an organization. So if we think about the front end, that is about attraction, attracting high potential individuals. There's so many ways, if you have looked for a job, you've searched there's so many ways that outreach can be done, that marketing can be done. The object of any internal recruitment function, or if you're going to use a third party to attract talent, that's the challenge. Sometimes finding that needle in the haystack, finding that maybe unicorn, or just getting a pool of high potential applicants and getting them to apply and be interested. Once someone is part of that organization, let's consider the high potential. In the field of IO, we sometimes refer to them as hypos, high potential. How do we take those individuals who are sometimes early career or raw in their career life, and how do we help them develop career development? How do we help them develop their KSAOs, their knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics, their competencies? And okay, once we have developed them, how do we hold on to them? In addition to that, some of what we're talking about here in talent management from the employer's perspective is not just selecting the person and keeping that person in a single silo, but determining where they could be best deployed throughout the organization. So there's what we call selection, but there's also placement. And sometimes that can be done through job rotations, cross-training, exposing your talent to different parts of the organization. And perhaps by doing that, you might find that that talent is going to be more valuable in one department as opposed to the one that you originally placed them in. So some of that is really a good thing, that you move some people around. So talent management is very much holistic and strategic. Next slide. So I'm going to really just give some very short attention to this slide because I do think that it has some significance. And as we sometimes say, for further reading, for further introspection into this topic, I just wanted to really recognize McKinsey & Company, which really has a lot of thought leadership that it has contributed to the field of management and human capital over the past probably quarter century and even a little bit before that. So you can see this note is from 1998, where McKinsey coined the phrase "a war for talent," because it has been sometimes difficult to find talent. Sometimes in certain areas, there's a talent shortage in certain sectors, whether we're talking about IT or programming, there have been talent shortages. So in some cases, if there's a limited talent pool domestically, let's say in the United States, and the needs are great, and sometimes the war for talent has had to become global. So I want to just mention McKinsey just very, very briefly, and really encourage people to read up on some of their work. As you will see in the second bullet point, the key historical drivers, the world has changed. The world has changed from what was a more manufacturing age, more manufacturing economy, to the information age. And all that technology has done, we'll be mentioning AI a little bit because that is, really the king of technology developments in 2025. But I just wanted to recognize McKinsey, and it's a good resource to have. Next slide, please. If we want to be a little bit more granular, looking at the evolution of human resources, or what previously was referred to as personnel. Now, if you say the word personnel in 2025, it's not a term that's commonly utilized because it has a certain very limited scope in its semantic connotation. But it's still important to recognize phase one, roughly from the 1950s to the 1980s. Personnel administration was very pragmatic, was very tactical. If you think about record keeping and from an applicant's perspective who becomes an employee, it's a lot of documentation and paperwork and the like. There was a lot focused on that. And those things are important. Those things are still important. You want to make sure that you get paid. You want to make sure you're on the health insurance plan. But that focus was somewhat limited. Phase two, the field morphed into what was known as human resource management. And here, I think that the key point is that unlike the more practical, static aspects of personnel, the word strategy, strategic alignment for business goals. Just to give you a sense of perhaps a career path for people in our program, the top echelon of the human capital totem pole within the organizational chart is known as the CHRO, the Chief Human Resource Officer. And I would emphasize the C in Chief Human Resource Officer because that C connects HR with the C-suite, with the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer, the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, the CAO, the Chief Administrative Officer. You have a bunch of C-level titles. And what happened with human resource management is that when it became more strategic, HR developed a seat at the table, a seat at the C-suite table, because now, as a resource, people became important. People were not commodities any longer, but they were connected now strategically to business goals. Phase three, I would say the first decade of the 21st century, that's where the term talent management emerged. And as I mentioned in a previous slide, it's looking at the life cycle, not just hiring, promotion, those transactions. It's looking at the person. It's also utilizing metrics, talent metrics, big data. These are all things that came into being in the early 2000s, and using those inputs to integrate with business strategy of the organization. Where we find ourselves right now is, as has been coined, strategic talent orchestration, because now technology is very, very important, including AI, of course, and certain technology-enabled solutions. But some other things have happened too. There's been a focus, perhaps because of some of the generational cohorts that are now being introduced to the workplace. We have the millennials, we have the Gen Zers, and then the Gen Alphas that are going to be emerging in 15 to 20 years into the workplace. And what those more younger generations are interested in are different things than perhaps a generation or two or three ago were interested in. So the employee experience is one characteristic of the newer generational cohorts. And therefore, the focus on the employee experience, what the organization can do. We talked about retention, retaining high potential. How do you do that? Do you do that with more money? In some cases, yes. More perks? In many cases, yes. But the point is that you want to pay more attention to the employee experience as opposed to just using them as commodities as existed in phase one. Next slide. We, of course, have a program, and that's one of the reasons why we're here, to explain that to you. We have some alumni, as I mentioned, some current students, some prospective students. So it's important to connect talent management to IO psychology. So this slide talks about some scholarly foundations, meaning where in the literature, what has occurred in the literature. So as you can see, human capital theory, the investment in people yields organizational returns. So that has been talked about really for many years. You just look at the dates on this, 1961, 1964. Okay, so at least in theory, even if that was never really put into practice to its full extent. And once again, you're also dealing with different generational cohorts back in the 60s. So that really presented a foundation for much of talent management that we're talking about here today. The resource-based view, if we think about talent as being sometimes a rare commodity, as I mentioned before, there's maybe a shortage of people that know how to code, and that has to be outsourced at times. But then maybe we can think about how do we insource that? How do we develop that talent pipeline through partnerships with educational institutions? Blau in 1964 talked about social exchange theory. When I work for a company, I want to get something out of that experience. I don't want to just provide inputs and take away a paycheck. Obviously, that is important pragmatically, but social exchange theory really set the groundwork for what we have sometimes in our capstone presentations, employee engagement. Employee engagement is a metric of social exchange. One of the key research areas that we've always looked at in IO psychology, as not just in the textbooks, but also as practitioners, is the notion of individual differences, measuring individual differences. So we have a course called Methods of Assessment that is really focusing on measuring those individual differences in terms of cognitive ability, personality, and how do you use those factors to make employment decisions. Some other key areas, look at the areas of career development and succession planning. Succession planning is about taking perhaps C-suite or other top management and figuring out if that person leaves, who's the next person in line? Are there sufficient skills that are on the bench to support that succession and the continuity of whatever that person provides in terms of the functions to the organization? Have that continuity there. I mentioned employee engagement, but then there's also another area of research that we've talked about in IO psychology for many years, and that is leadership. And how do we develop leaders? What kind of leaders are we looking for? Are we looking for just managers? Or are we looking for something more than that? So that's been a research area within IO psychology that is very much relevant to our discussion here today. And the evidence base shows that research shows that talent management is going to have a significant influence on the outcomes of the organization if it is integrated holistically, as we've talked about before. So it works. It works, and it should be considered. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but what I will say is that within our program, we try to connect our students to what the scholars are saying about talent management. Because often what the scholars are saying is going to impact practice. Very often at conferences where C-suite, like CFOs, CEOs are attending, there might be scholars from universities who represent thought leadership in any topic, including talent management. So it's important to always be connected, whether you're a practitioner, and I would add that our program is mostly applied. Occasionally we'll have someone who goes into academia, but for the most part, it is applied. And yet, in terms of our field, it's still so important to connect us with what the scholars are saying. So as you can see, some of the critical success factors, context is so significant. What is the relationship between the individual and the organization? Some of the research gaps that have been talked about include what is talent, and I presented some, let's say, with the McKinsey, but not everybody agrees on talent, especially maybe some of the differences across demographic cohorts. Okay, what are the long-term benefits or returns on investment that we have if an organization decides to deploy resources in talent management? We live in a global economy. How do we integrate people from different nationalities and cultures into our organization? They may come from different cultural traditions. They may have, in addition to skills, different skills, they may have different cultural values. Yet they still are important, and we need to somehow keep them in the mix and keep them engaged with others. The last point, I think, is also significant in that in any field, any scientific field, and IO psychology is a social science, sometimes you have the, I don't want to say dichotomy, but the duality of theory and practice. And in our program, we really try to meld the two together. We try to give our students an appreciation of the theory, even if they are going to ultimately be practitioners. And we do that through what we cover in the classroom. Our advisory board provides mentorship about what's going on in the real world, in their organizations and beyond. So that, I think, is really, it reflects a little bit about our program, as well as what the research gaps there are out there. Next slide, please. Okay. As I've mentioned, AI. I think I've said it twice, or maybe even 3 times now throughout my presentation. And we did, back in spring of 2025, we did one that was focused on AI. So while this isn't AI focused as a presentation, we're focusing on talent management, but we really need to give some attention to AI and automation. If we think about one of the fears that people have with AI from a workforce perspective is my job going to be safe? Can I be replaced? It used to be, can I, in a factory setting, will I be replaced by a robot, by automation, right? And there still is quite a bit of automation that takes place. They're talking about the self-driving cars and taxis. I can't remember the name of that company with the taxis that are self-driving. I think in San Francisco they're piloting it. But that's just one example of automation. So what's going to be the future of talent? maybe talent has to shift from one skill or competency to another because maybe the current skill is something that can be taken on by automation. So it's an important thing to consider. In fact, in my job analysis course, I'm asking each of my students to consider in the job that they're analyzing, what would be like the AI impact, the impact of AI on that job in the future. So that's kind of an interesting thing that I'm incorporating into my course this semester. One of the things I believe that has really transformed the world of work since COVID is work location. And some of our jobs are quite a bit location agnostic, where it doesn't matter where you are. Obviously, there might be some time zone differences and some other considerations, but a lot of what we do in the professional world, which I think would characterize much of what our students, graduates, and business leaders who are out there on our call here today experience, is where we do our work. In some cases, it doesn't matter. However, one of the things that I talk quite a bit about are boundaries. Boundaries of place, boundaries of time. Think about a supervisor who sends a message, let's say a text or an email, to a direct report at 10 o'clock at night. I received that email. Why am I looking at my email at 10 o'clock at night? It could have come through text, perhaps. Do I feel pressured to respond? And if we look at the theory of positive reinforcement, if I do respond, then that might increase the likelihood that that manager may send me something at 11 o'clock the next night, because somehow it's been determined that I am always accessible. So that's an example of a boundary of time and place that might need to be considered in our hybrid work model. The skills-based hiring, what the person brings to the table rather than the letters after the name. I mentioned the employee experience, and that's why employee engagement is so important. Because AI and other technologies are having such an effect, what's going to happen if AI does make a certain job function obsolete? How is that person going to pivot? So the idea of lifelong learning, whereby an employee within an organization or even outside of the framework of the organization is in need of updating. We talk about like my phone, right? My phone, I just updated my phone, the operating system. You have to constantly do that. So in a sense, using that as a metaphor, in certain ways, we have to update our skill set to keep it current. So that really requires an approach to continuous learning. I attended the Greater Baltimore SHRM conference yesterday. It was focusing on employment law updates because there's so much that changes in the field of employment law, national, local, state. I need to keep up to date in what's going on with family leave and other areas of employment law. That's just me. There are other fields of endeavor, other subspecialties within IO that also require attending conferences. So we encourage our students to attend like the SIOP conference and other professional development activities. DEI, so much of today's workplace is concerned with that. So these are some current changes that are on the table, current evolutions that are in progress, that are taking place. Next slide, please. The changing nature of work. So I'll point to a couple of things. The gig economy. Think about what the gig economy is. We experience it all the time. A gig is where somebody can participate, can contribute to help somebody or help with something at a given time. Flexible talent arrangements. Think about somebody who moonlights as an Uber driver. That's part of the gig economy. I want to make some money after hours. I have a vehicle. I want to monetize it. Maybe I bought a nice car, and I'm maybe 4 hours an evening, and Uber is a platform that helps with the gig economy. I have a car. I want to let people know where I am, that I can pick them up. On the other hand, you have the passenger. I'm letting the Uber drivers know where I am and where I need to get to, and I'm willing to pay for it because I don't have a car in this foreign country or out of town of where I live. The multi-generational workforce, I alluded to that before. You have maybe 4 generations that occupy the workforce of today. Skill obsolescence, talked about that. Values alignment. Some organizations that are nonprofit are referred to as mission-driven organizations. I might want to work for an organization that is aligned with my values. Whatever those values are, they could be social values, they could be flexibility values. So that is another element that is becoming important in today's changed workplace. Talent mobility. Can I recruit talent who are not here near where the headquarters is? And does that really matter? Am I better off hiring somebody who's out of the area because they're a rock star? It doesn't matter that they don't come into the office because we can Zoom them in. Obviously, there are some equity issues with forcing some people to come into the office and allowing flexibility for others, but that's beyond today's conversation. So the strategic implications of all this are you're going to see words like agility, flexibility, personalized. All of those are contingent on the individual, focused on the individual, focused on the individual's needs. Next slide, please. The next few slides deal with what we call best practices. And in any field, we want to find out what the best practices are. And that's why it's important to keep up with some of those best practices through conferences, through webinars, through reading, McKinsey, all these other, thought leadership, scholars. So building your talent pipeline. Okay, so the talent pipeline, just think about, what a pipe is. We have people coming in through the maybe entry level of the organization, early career. So how do we attract? What brand are we putting out to attract top talent? How do we treat candidates? One of the problems that has occurred, certainly in my lifetime, is where candidates have a less than stellar application experience, candidate experience. They don't feel respected. So that's something that really needs to be taken into account through surveys, through metrics, through having outside parties looking in, having diverse sourcing. How do we evaluate the person's skills? Well, we're going to focus on competencies. Looking at cultural fit. Some of what we have seen recently utilizing technology, including AI, is AI-powered candidate matching. Now, one of the dangers of that, I just have to put in that caveat, even though it sounds great, it can maybe find a round peg to fit exactly into that round hole. What are the algorithms that are used? Is it having an adverse impact against any protected group? So while in theory it sounds great, we have to have our guardrails. And those concepts of adverse impact, for example, are things that we talk about in our courses. Virtual reality job previews. It's something that's quite inexpensive once they're developed for organizations, and it can walk somebody through that type of job. A job preview, a realistic job preview, is a set of information that is presented to an applicant, a candidate, that shows the good, the bad, the ugly. And that research has found that if you're upfront and transparent with the candidate or applicant, then that can reduce turnover. Using, let's say, LinkedIn to find talent. I'm sure we know of individuals in our social circles and our family circles who were found through LinkedIn or other social media. Predictive hiring analytics. Okay, so it can get very, very fancy, and elegant, these predictive talent analytics. If I hire this individual with this skill set, what is the likelihood that this person will stay for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? And that can help guide decisions. It may not be entirely, accurate all the time, but they're using a lot of predictive analytics. And certainly inclusive assessment technologies. Once again, you have to be concerned with adverse impact and what the algorithms are to keep things inclusive. Next slide, please. Okay, development and growth. So you take that person, that high potential individual, coming up with an individualized growth pathway for that person. Because what speaks to that person may be that personal touch of a mentor, walking that person through, having that relationship with, let's say, a mentor, making the growth process through the organization very much custom to that individual, what speaks to that individual. Stretch assignments, I mentioned cross-training before, that can give a person exposure to another part of the organization. Hey, I kind of like that. I like that function. I came in as a trainee in this area, but perhaps I want to develop in another area and maybe make a switch to that other department next year. Mentoring and coaching, cross-functional, leadership pipelines focuses on not just the high potential in terms of skills, that rock star who's a great individual performer, but is this person management material? Is this person leadership material? Maybe we can put this person into the leadership succession planning pipeline so that this person might eventually grow into a CEO role. Okay, peer-to-peer learning networks. Once again, sometimes a peer, a coworker can be a more impactful influence than top-down. And finally, on this slide, continuous feedback systems. So I'm constantly gathering data of how a person feels in terms of engagement, how a person feels and satisfied they are with their mentorship, with their professional development. So these are best practices for development and growth that we are seeing today. Next slide, please. Okay, so continuing along that path, how do we retain? How do we retain? There might be some pragmatic things that we can use, some incentives. Total rewards. So total rewards includes both compensation, like salary. I'm sorry, it includes salary and benefits, perhaps perks that go beyond what the person's base salary are. Does the person, this high potential person, have a career advancement opportunities? In some cases, the person above that individual is not moving, right? Person is stable, working out well. So maybe we need to use cross-training to find out maybe someplace else in order to keep that person. Takes constant work, constant maintenance, this career journey of a high potential, or maybe somebody who's not branded as high potential, but somebody we definitely want to retain. If we zoom out of the person's job, the 9 to 5 or whatever boundaries we have, what about integration with my holistic life. It's not just about the job. In fact, it's been said that earlier generational cohorts, it was like I lived to work. I lived to work. Now it is shifted the opposite direction where I work to live. I want to enjoy life at some point. And a lot of times you don't want to wait until retirement age to do that. You want to do that along the way. So looking at integrating my whole life into this particular job. One of the areas that has become very much a focus is recognition in terms of training, recognition in terms of credentialing, having meaningful work as a reward for hard work. That's be a way of retention, employee engagement. I'm not going to go through all of these elements. You can certainly read up on them in the future. But psychological safety and trust. I want to come to a place where I feel valued, but I also feel psychologically safe. And there's so many things out there that could put a person outside of that safety zone, that comfort zone. Next slide, please. Okay. So the 4 elements here, once again, I'm mindful of the time. I want to leave some time for questions, but the 4 elements here are core framework, talent architecture, operational excellence, and cultural foundation. So this slide really summarizes a lot of what we have already talked about. So this is a good kind of summary slide of what of the points, many of the points that we've already covered. Next slide. As we look into the future, some things to understand, to anticipate. As I mentioned once before, when people are concerned that AI might take away their jobs, so we need to somehow figure out what the interface between the human and machine will be, or machine learning, which is basically AI. So we have to understand that AI is here to stay. It's not just a trend, but how do we incorporate AI into the human experience? We have to be very mindful of people's humanity. Sustainability, a lot of talk about the environment, climate change, and social responsibility. Blockchain credentialing, if you don't know anything about that, it's about, I've experienced this as when I got a certain certification recently, and how to integrate that within my LinkedIn profile. So there's a whole, like Credly, I think it's a platform where it allows you to post a badge of a credential onto your profile. So I can't say I'm an expert in blockchain credentialing other than the fact that I've used it in terms of showing in a secure way, and it's a way that's sort of verified that you have achieved a certain credential. Global virtual teams. If we want to hold on to people, we may have to allow them to move around a little bit, or maybe our company is multinational. So we have to embrace the global virtual teams, which with all of its challenges of time zones and cultural differences. So moving forward, one of the important things is what sort of investments are we going to make in our human resources? So if we think about investment, we're investing to get return on investment. So how do we do that from a human capital perspective? The last point on this slide is employee well-being and resilience. There's so much research today about resilience. That seems to be a very hot topic. And how do we develop resilience in our employees? Is it important? I think it is. So that's, once again, thinking about the whole person, not just in terms of the skills and competencies that the person brings in, but how the person feels emotionally. That's really, I think, where the psychology of IO psychology really is a contributor to the employee experience. Next. Okay. So if I was a consultant, right, and designing some sort of intervention for talent management, this is the way I might break it down. Okay, four phases. And once again, this is like maybe a cheat sheet. If anybody wants to take this slide, print out a business card. I'm an organizational consultant and I'm specializing in talent management. You may come in with a proposal that would include this plan, 4 phases in 18 months. Next slide. Okay, so talent management, data, I mentioned big data before. We have to collect data. We have to collect data to validate our assumptions that our programs are working, to figure out things that maybe are bottlenecked or things that are not working that well. But there might be some other, not just metrics, not just numbers, but qualitative indicators as well on these factors like bench strength of leadership. ROI considerations, that gets us back into some of the quantitative analytics. What is the cost per hire? Is it expensive, or is there room for shortening the timeline? So much of what we can do is quantitative, but don't ignore the qualitative indicators as well. Next slide. Okay, so we're really just wrapping things up in our presentation today. So we're kind of coming up to our last few slides, and I'm trying to leave some time for questions here. Once again, if you were looking at it from a consultant's perspective, these would be things that you would recommend that leadership does in terms of immediate as well as long-term. Next steps. Next slide. Sorry. Okay, so these are some open questions. And I maybe focus these, looking at these questions to some of our leadership in the Montgomery County community and beyond. Maybe these are some things to ask yourself about your organization, about your talent challenges, your preparation for the future. Are you aligned? Are you positioned for the future as AI plays a role? How are you measuring success? All of these things I think are within reach in terms of the quantitative metrics, the qualitative metrics. So if this is something that you're interested in as an organization, contact us. We have some thought leadership to be able to provide you and your organization. Next slide. Okay, these are just some additional resources that I'm not going to go through because you can read up on them. McKinsey is identified here, as well as professional organizations. So these are future. This is further reading on the topic. Next. These are some very small fonted references, but if you blow it up, you can get access to certain articles. So I'm not going to go through that as well. I think that wraps it up. So I'm going to open it up to questions. Dr. Abad, were there any questions in the chat that you want to bring to light?
No, but people are free to speak or type in the chat. I can read it out, or you can take a look too.
Okay.
If you're answering.
Yes. So are there any questions? You have my contact information here.
We have a question. Yeah.
Yes, a question. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the name, but please feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Cool. Thank you. Not going to take too long. My question is back when you mentioned the importance of strategic alignment and talent architecture.
Yeah.
So from a consulting perspective, what would you say is the biggest challenge organizations face when trying to connect their business strategy to their people strategy?
I think it's convincing some of the people that hold the purse strings, and I don't mean to disparage any of the financial types, but sometimes people that are very interested in dollars and cents can't necessarily see the long-term value of talent management investment, right? What did I see once? HR person goes to the CEO and tries to get the CEO to invest in learning and development. And the CEO responds, well, what happens if we train staff and then they leave? Okay, that's an interesting question because you're investing and you're not getting any return on investment. So the HR person responds and says, what happens if we don't train them and they stay? Okay, so in that situation, in that scenario, then they might be in fact a liability to the organization. So to answer your question, I think one of the challenges is really to get buy-in, and it's something we talk about in our classes. It's something that the advisory board members would talk about how to, what language to speak to the CEOs, to the CFOs, using language that will resonate with them, but really imparting our values of employee engagement and training and onboarding. So I would say that's one of the challenges. It's sort of like a language barrier, and you have to learn to speak the language of the CEO and the CFO. That's a great question. Thank you. Any others? Okay, if there are no other questions, I'm going to hand it back for closing comments to Chris. I believe you're going to close us out and take us home. Thank you.
Yes,
thank
indeed.
you everybody for participating, and we look forward to staying in touch with you. All right, Chris.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Lassen. And again, thank you all for attending today. I just have a few slides here just to close us out. Here again, just reiterating our contact us form and the email address at the bottom, and feel free to scan the QR code again if that's more preferable to you. If you are interested in our IO program or a certificate at all, we encourage you to fill out that form or shoot us an email, and we'll make sure that you get the information that you're looking for. In terms of next steps, if you are interested in perhaps pursuing our Industrial Organizational Psychology MPS program or Organizational Consulting PBC program, just reiterating here some next steps. We are currently accepting applications for the fall 2026 semester. Our IO program only admits new students in the fall, so that is our next cohort. We're accepting applications until May 1st, 2026, so you still have quite a bit of time if you are interested. We encourage you to review our admission requirements at the link there. You can also apply online at the link in the second box there. Along with the online application, you will be required to submit current resume, official copies of your undergraduate transcripts, a statement of purpose with your goals and what you want to achieve from the program, as well as 3 letters of recommendations. All of that needs to be submitted by May 1st, 2026 in order for your application to be considered. And then after a complete application has been received, you should hear back within around 2 weeks with your admission decision. So that's all from me. So thank you all for joining us today. Again, if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out. But that's it for today.